Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. We always forget as we dance to the music that there's an audio version as well, so nobody will be able to understand any of the references. So I try not to talk about Eric's dancing too much as we kick off. But that is a good point that you can catch us next day on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all of your favorite places. Usually up by about lunchtime or maybe a little bit later in the day if I'm sleeping in. We are welcomed, or we are joined and welcomed today, Darren Orange, Tesla road tripper extraordinaire and Chicago resident, but we'll be talking about your exploits, Darren, going down to Florida and everything in between. So welcome and thanks for spending time with us on a little bit short notice today.
Always a good time.
Yeah, thank you. I have to hold my hands up in error. I conflated the dates of the Mercedes-Benz high-power charging network episode, so that's the next one in the pipeline. So if anyone's joining confused, that's what we're talking about in 2 weeks' time. Today we are on autonomous driving systems and road trips coming up. So we'll get into the different systems, talk a lot about full self-driving, as Darren has his Tesla equipped with that and did very well by all accounts. But before we dive into that, let's get into the news, which for this point of the start of quarter two is looking back to quarter one and EV sales in the first quarter of the year. So they take a week or two to trickle in. Didn't have them ready because we were just kind of into the new month last time we convened. But this time we have pretty decent view of what's going on with the EV sales year over year in the first quarter, which is traditionally a bit of a slower time for the auto sector, but obviously had some different kind of influencing factors as we changed administrations in January, and kind of EV tax credits were a little bit up in the air, still in place at the time of recording, and hopefully for the foreseeable future. But here's how the numbers looked from Cox Automotive as the manufacturers started to report. So you can see, as we look over to the left, if you're on audio, I'll try and describe as much of this as possible. But we're on a massive whopping 249% increase for Porsche year over year in quarter one 25 compared to 24. Then just behind them, Toyota with 196% increase over the previous year. GMC, so General Motors, with the Sierra Denali EV, a bunch of others coming in, 183%. Obviously, we're looking at percentages here, so if it was a low percentage or low sales volume the year before, doesn't take too much to increase. Then Subaru, only the Solterra in play. Volvo, bunch of different EVs. Chevrolet, the big one, really does have a good roster and had sold really reasonably well the previous year, 114% up year over year. Only the Bolt EV and a few of the Ultium models in play the previous year, but this year looking strong with Blazer EV, Equinox EV, and a bunch of other models coming to market. Then we have Genesis, Jaguar, Cadillac, BWM, which should be BMW, Nissan, Ford, Hyundai, and Audi, all kind of in lower double digits or single digits, but in positive territory. It's the one where we get to the first one in negative territory that really starts to get into the headlines, I guess. The Tesla sales drop for the first time in a long time, down 9%. Not a big number, but when you consider how many Tesla sells and the fact that they're usually up year over year, that's the the concerning part for folks who are looking at the brand and wondering if they can bounce back, whether that's the Model Y kind of refresh waiting or deeper issues that we've discussed before we'll get into. Then you've got Lexus, Mini, neither of them are huge numbers. Kia, maybe a surprise there, given that the Hyundai group has been doing pretty well in terms of its EVs, but the EV6 not pulling up any trees, and EV9 actually pretty positive EV reception, but maybe hitting some blocks. And then finally Rivian on the far right with sales down 37% year over year. So kind of rounding that out. I hope that was enough for the audio folks the next day. But let's see, Walter, do you want to give me a take on kind of first impressions of the numbers, what you're thinking?
Yeah, so those numbers, as you say, were a little bit difficult to actually put practical application around because with GMC, for instance, the Hummer going from like 4 Hummers to triple digits, just hundreds and maybe up into a couple of thousand. And the GMC Sierra EV shows rapid growth. And obviously Tesla, their bread and butter is Y production, and they were going through a retooling. So whether or not it was brand erosion or not, it's a bit of an issue of trying to read the tea leaves. I understand we won't really know brand erosion versus retooling numbers until Q2 numbers come out later on in the year. At least that's the speculation that I'm hearing. There's also the Cybertruck issue, initially thought to be somewhere around 250,000 units, at which point they'd be earning, from what I understand, about $1 billion in profit. And if they hover around 80,000, it's somewhere around 100 million, 120 million, which on a balance sheet perspective is not major since their portfolio is so diversified. They could probably take that hit and just keep on rolling as long as the Y snaps back. So really there's a story to be told about Tesla long term. However, I think the quiet story, when you weed through the numbers and the big spikes that are being portrayed there, is a bit of nugget that I heard, that right now the forecast is for Cadillac to have 1/3 of the cars sold in 2025 be a all-electric powertrain. That is, in my opinion, indication you have to be really able to do some pretty creative mental gymnastics to try to explain away the fact that we're not in the middle of an EV revolution when a brand like Cadillac is selling 1/3 of their cars this year fully electric. And there's I don't know any narrative anywhere that is saying that it's going to go down from that point. It's only going to go up. I mean, GM is figured out how to skin this cat. Sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to say that out loud. And the numbers are increasing, and this is what an EV revolution looks like.
Yeah, I mean, Cadillac's certainly kind of a mercurial brand that has needed to shift its buying base traditionally, I guess. And it's obviously had those plans to move into the EV space much more aggressively than maybe others have done. So you can see the benefit for them. Darren, as far as the Tesla numbers go, obviously we've talked in the Q1 right in the middle of all of the kind of Tesla hubbub, which is still somewhat ongoing, but we're kind of waiting to see if that lasts and bears out as it has in Europe, whether the North American market will be down because of just Q1 activity or gap between the new Y, or if that's a long-term effect of a bunch of different things. What are you seeing or what are you kind of feeling from the numbers that are there and the general sentiment towards Tesla at this time?
Yeah, so having gone through, my wife having just purchased the Model Y early into March, basically the inventory was depleted for the most part, right? So it was hard to come by a Model Y, especially with the heavy discounts. They basically did not exist, right? So we had to wait and see when one would randomly pop up to grab one. And the discounts were fantastic. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, that probably impacted them depleting very quickly. I'm sure that had an impact. But the fact that we had like literally 2 or 3 cars in like the entire state of Illinois over the course of a week that would fit what we were targeting, that's just not enough cars. And you couldn't order it either, right? So it's not like you had no choice. So you had to go with what was available. It's possible, I would say highly likely, that probably really impacted them. If we're all in agreement that generally speaking, the Model Y is the highest performing vehicle by far, then not having inventory to sell that car for, let's say, at the appropriate rate for a couple weeks, even let's just say a week even, that could be enough to swing their overall quarter significantly. If you compound it with issues like we're saying that we saw with people waiting for the Juniper refresh, there's a good chance that's the bulk of what's going on. That said, just kind of matching their numbers would have been great. But obviously, if you stop production on their most popular car for any amount of time, I'm surprised they weren't more negative, frankly. So they did a good job building up enough inventory to keep their numbers up. But let's be honest, those cars were also heavily discounted too. I mean, the car my wife purchased was down $8,000 off sticker price, right? So there was motivation to purchase these cars. So there was incentive to move them, but I don't think it's going to be a long term. Now, that said, I know speaking to outside of Tesla, I'm not surprised Cadillac is doing well because the value proposition there makes a lot of sense. And I think that's been an ongoing conversation that they seem to be making the best EVs that GM is making right now, and the most ones that are most to be excited about. This is my takeaway on it, just from their value, because if you look at the Blazer versus the Lyriq, it's not hard to go to the Lyriq, in my opinion. So if you're looking at it from a Tesla perspective, it makes sense that they would be down, but then with the inventory going well for GM, it makes sense that they would be having a good upward curve because they have the inventory available to sell the car, which is critical at the end of the day. So
you gave me a great lead in there to GM. Thank you. I mean, it's certainly, you know, when you talk about value proposition, that's where models like the Equinox EV and to a lesser extent maybe the Blazer EV are starting to come in. I know, you know, only a story of one, but I have relatives in Pennsylvania who picked up an Equinox EV last month. Weren't even considering a Tesla. Well, yeah, we know Walter got one. That's been covered well. And the only downside to me relating that vehicle to them was that they didn't get a portable charge cord with it. Apparently that was discontinued for 2025 model year and was not available as it was in 2024. But they did specifically say that they were not going to go with the Tesla. Again, case of one, all anecdotal, but you know, there's someone ready there to step in, right? So Eric, as far as GM's, you know, we've given some props to their stable and their ever expanding kind of base of electric vehicles for everyone. How are you reading the numbers that we just kind of went through?
Well, I think Walter called it out too, or maybe you did that. Cox, they're breaking it down by brand, which I don't want to say is disingenuous, but outside of what like Lexus, Toyota, and just a couple of other automakers, you're basically comparing subdivisions of GM to entire companies of other automakers. So I think there's some discordance there. But yeah, Chevrolet being their number one seller and then also still being up over 100%. It basically what I see from that is it's allaying any fears that the lack of the Bolt EV was going to hurt GM. And I mean, and it is in the sense that I think a lot of us are feeling this, that we still want some more affordable EVs on the road. But in the meantime, you know, the Equinox is filling that gap pretty well, right? So, and if it is any sort of a harbinger for the future and for the upcoming Bolt EV, goodness, we could be seeing Chevrolet's growth numbers 100% quarter over quarter over quarter over quarter for the next probably 6 to 8 quarters. So I think that was the one that was the big, you know, the big plus. And yeah, I see a lot of people picking up Equinoxes, and it's just the easiest, you know, it really, I think, and, you know, Darren made that point about the Model Y. I think the Equinox and the Model Y are going to basically be carrying EV sales in North America probably for the next 2 years. I think if you combine those two vehicles alone, just those two vehicles, they're probably going to represent close to 50% of all EV sales in North America for the next 2 years. So I think that's a big win for GM, but I won't lie. My concern is more forward looking. Like, we don't, with this economy and what's going on and the tariff wars and the uncertainty, we're at a record level of uncertainty. And I think what we see for Q1 of this year, unfortunately, is a misrepresentation of what we're going to be able to expect for the rest of the year. Because the first 2 months were relatively stable, relatively normal. And I think even seeing these declines that we're seeing with some companies, I think that started happening in the last month or two of Q1. It wasn't so even though we're seeing these declining sales numbers, I don't think that they were declining specifically like in the first month or two. And like you said, traditionally Q1 is normally a low sales month for EVs. It's because you're getting off of that EV credit. But if you think that EV credit is going away, then you're going to get that car whenever you can get it. So, which is going to pump those Q1 numbers up even more than they would be normally. So we used to see a big spike Q4 because people are trying to get the credit before the end of the year so they could get it in their next tax return. Now it's like, is the credit going to be there by June or August, or, is it going away? So I need to get this vehicle now. And then you kicked off the transition to me, Steve, with an anecdote. So I'll share an anecdote of my own. Completely meaningless. I mean, we do see that in California, apparently California specifically, Tesla's numbers were down 15%. So even worse than they were nationwide, which California has always been their biggest market. And they're now below 50% of the EV sales in California. And I can just say from my personal experience, driving up and down I-5, I used to basically be able to set my watch to the trucks filled with Teslas that were basically being headed out to customers, right? So you could count the Tesla truck delivery trucks going on the freeway and just sort of set your watch to it. Now it's intermittent at best. I see a truck, then I see another truck, then 5-10 minutes go by and I don't see a single Tesla delivery truck. So I can say that from my personal anecdotal experience, there's a massive decline here, at least on the West Coast.
Steve, I want to throw in something. Maybe Eric, do we generally agree that the tax incentive for EVs, as it's configured right now, drives production to the United States in its goal long term for EVs? Do we believe that? It seems like the terms over time it does drive production towards the United States, right? Building it here.
You mean in the idea that the new one now requires onshore manufacturing materials?
Yeah. Well, with Hyundai, I mean, the car behind me now is being produced in the US now because of, I mean, it could have been in the works before the bill came through, but it was very conveniently timed if it was, because they fast-tracked that so they could make it in the US.
Yeah.
For that.
I mean, my inclination says there is something to it, right? But at the same time, and we've had this discussion, right, with the tariffs, not us specifically, but this discussion has been had multiple times with economists and everything else about tariffs and build America, buy America. These factories take years to put together, right? This is that discussion point that Walter and I always had about GM, and why I kept saying people are underestimating them, because they were literally in the process of building 5 different battery factories, right? Those take years to build and years to ramp up. The tooling, whether it's in Mexico or North America for their EVs, takes years to build those factories and get them established. So flipping a switch on an economic policy like a tariff or, the build America, buy America, these companies can't react that fast. So I do think there's an incentive, but it's an incentive for the vehicles that were already being built here. And if, to your point, Steve, like Hyundai they're in the process of building a domestic factory and then they can turn it online, they're going to benefit from it as well. So I do think there is a benefit. It's just, I think these policies can shift faster than the companies can adjust or adapt to them. And that might drive down some sales and some production. So,
I mean, on the other hand, you've got Polestar, right? So that, I mean, I don't know if it has been fully removed yet, but there's definitely some uncertainty around whether the Polestar 2 will continue to be offered, because that's, coming from Chinese factories, possibly European. But a stretch, but the Polestar 3 is down in Charleston. I think that's where production was coming for that, and that's that's kind of to their benefit of having that domestic supply, and that's going to continue to be sold. So you kind of got a juxtaposition there. But again, both policies have the same end goal to an extent of bringing supply and sourcing back to a domestic supply chain, but they're very different approaches, right? One's very much a carrot of incentives and being able to access credits. The other is a stick of we're going to whack you if you don't, set up shop in our backyard.
So the big elephant in the room in terms of growth was Porsche. Are they domestically produced, or is that 100% imported? I would think that would be 100% imported. So
yeah, I don't. I didn't go back into the sourcing side of it really, because I think, as you said, it's kind of a lot of this is more driven by either people trying to get in pending potentially the tax credit going away, which is something we haven't even really touched on that much. It's it hasn't really been the focus. Charging infrastructure and funding for it has been much more kind of immediately under threat. I think we always thought that there would be front-loaded sales in 2025 because of that threat. Whether it's people just rushing to buy and then not having a sale later in the year, or if they don't go away at all, or if they are going to go away Q2, Q3, everybody running up to that deadline and trying to get in. But I mean, the auto industry as a whole now is going to get more expensive, right? So everyone's kind of looking towards used vehicles in general, and then the used EV market, depreciated values, a lot of decent cars, even stuff like Genesis, some Genesis models getting close to that $25,000 price point used. If you can start getting some of those luxury EVs under 25,000 and qualifying for state and federal used credits, I think there's going to be some bargains to be had. It just won't show up in the new registrations numbers, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also see a potential spike in the value of used EVs. If the demand goes through the roof for whatever reason, say oil prices, gas prices go up, there's a finite number of these vehicles that have been produced. And so, yeah, getting them, whether new or used, especially with China's response to the tariffs of cutting off critical materials, including rare earths and things like that, a lot of these EV manufacturers can be in trouble in terms of accessing those in a way that they can use them for domestic auto production. So yeah, we could see EV demand outstripping production for maybe the first time in a while. So
well, moving into wonderful pre-owned or currently owned EVs, Paul in his 2020 Bolt EV, Bakersfield, California, oil capital of the state. Welcome, thanks for joining us. Dactylonian in a 2021 Audi e-tron 55, Northeast Maryland. Welcome. Everybody in the crowd here has stories of used EVs and what they're worth to them. So we'll appreciate those. Thank you. Doug Stevenson from British Columbia, the second largest, no, possibly the largest market in the Canadian side of things. Not sure whether it's Quebec or BC. I would think BC is right up there. Wills Leonardo, hello from Pottsville, Pennsylvania, Schuylkill County, welcome. Brian Ribby in Minnesota, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Spring is here in terms of calendar, and hopefully weather is getting there where you are as well. I know we've had some chills here, but the weather has been good the last couple of days. Jay Donaldson, good evening. Chevy Bolt EV and that good old Chevy Equinox EV in jolly old Ohio. That's the GM stable representing old and new. Cecil Martin, hello from Cary, North Carolina. Welcome. Ariel Batista, Jacksonville, Florida. Volkswagen ID4 2022.
Yeah, look at the miles he put on that thing. A 2022 ID4 with over 100,000 miles.
Got
impressive.
Free charging, you use it. That's what you have to do. Welcome and good high mileage stuff. I want to actually get on to how many miles we've got between us, because I'm not sure if it's up to 750,000 plus, but I think it must be getting close between the miles we've done. Andy Getch, Florida Ford Mustang Mach-E driver, welcome. Alex Dennis, Chevy Bolt EUV, Greenville, North Carolina. Very glad you could catch the live stream. Thank you very much for joining. Chase Drum, Grid Connections podcast and consultancy now. Chase doing a lot of good work in the industry, advocacy, fleet consulting, a lot of electrification work there. So check out gridconnections.co, I believe it is, for the consulting side. And definitely check out his conversations with folks in the industry. 2022 Model Y, 2025 Model 3, and a 1987 Land Rover Defender 90. So it's the rounding out the garage for those off-road trips that the Model Y can't do. Let's see. Yeah, I'm planning to eventually electrify when the V8 finally kicks it, but it keeps plugging along. Hey, it's still doing its life, then keep it on the road as long as you can. Scott Owens from Atlanta, Georgia, BMW iX. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for the suggestions for various content pieces. Always appreciate those, and keep them coming. Let me just see if I've missed anybody else before we get into. Yes, I did. Diane Wallace in a Rivian R1T and Hyundai Ioniq 6, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, down in Walter's neck of the woods. Thank you for joining us. And then we have Platform Fanatic. Hyundai factory was started way back in Trump's first term. I'd have to check the dates. It could have been on the roadmap. Definitely there was a lot of activity around then, including the stuff that Eric was talking about with GM's factory planning and battery production. Ye Old Traveler, Southeast Michigan. Hello, thanks for joining us. Bill B, Tampa, Florida, in an Audi e-tron. Good evening. Good evening to Kelvis. So good they named him twice. From Maryland with a Cadillac Lyric and an SEV. What am I missing? Yeah, I can't tell that one. Sorry, I'm missing the acronym. Maybe we can figure that out as we go along here.
It's a Leaf, right?
Say again?
Is that a Leaf?
Could be. That's right. One of the trim levels, I believe. There you go. Thank you. There's the wisdom in the crowd. 2024 Cadillac Lyric and a 2025. There's another Equinox EV. These are all coming up. And then rounding out the welcomes and last but not least, thank you for joining us. High Speed Golf Cart, the perfect name. 2020 Bolt EV and a 2024 Volkswagen ID4 Pro S. Good evening from Central Pennsylvania. So thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you hanging around whilst we got through the news and had some thoughts on the EV sales in Q1. So I wanted to hand over to Darren here for the road tripping side of things. We're going to kind of overlap here some of the road trip stories and looking forward to these warmer months as we hit the road again, but also through the lens of advanced or autonomous driver assist systems, the various levels that we've got, Tesla full self-driving being kind of one of the main leading systems, and one that Darren used to its fullest on his trip. So I'll hand over the floor to you, Darren, and tell us kind of where you've been and what you used to get there.
So it's a funny story, basically. We were looking for a Model Y. I should start with that. And my wife, we purchased a Model Y. She bought a Model Y literally the day before I'm supposed to drive to Florida. So the original plan was to take the Model 3 that we have that has full self-driving on it, like it's been purchased for it from 2019. And that was the car that was going to make the trip. But ended up getting this Model Y, and she'd already purchased tickets. So she and my daughter, Astra, actually flew to Florida, and myself and our dog, Pumpkin, drove to Florida in the Model Y. The new Model Y obviously had hardware 4. So we had to do that, which was unique. And we started off in an odd situation because I got to drive her to the airport with our baby in the Model 3, drive back home, get the dog, get in the Model Y, and then start driving to Florida all in the same day. It's kind of crazy in that regards. And it was kind of amazing because the car literally drove 100% of the time almost. So I did not take control of the car except for one scenario from Chicago to just south of Indianapolis. There's a supercharger just south of it. It usually is out of reach for my Model 3, but the new Model Y could do it. I had to touch it because so in Indiana, the transition point, they actually have tollways that have gates, and it stopped at the gate. But there was a problem with my iPass or the transponder to get through the toll. So I had to deal with that issue. So I had to take control for that moment. once I did, I gave it back to the car and let the car continue the trip. So it literally did all that initial 208 miles, and it got me to the supercharger in the parking lot. And then I told it to park hands-free. It did all that. And that was kind of the continuing trend. We
Just
really
very,
didn't, yeah.
very quickly, I know that stretch, and I was actually on it not too long ago. The 294, 290, I'm assuming, is where you went.
65 was most of the way. Yeah. The
Well,
Sky
before that,
Bridge.
yes, but before that,
Skyway.
as you're coming out of O'Hare, you have to do like 294, and then you loop around to the Sky.
Yeah, so from O'Hare, though, I came back home, which is in River Grove, and then left from there. So I didn't actually
You
take
did the
that.
Edens.
Yeah, so I came up
Okay.
and went to 290 up down the middle.
Yeah, because
So
294 was kind of beat up when I was on it with a lot of potholes, and that was
welcome
one
to
of the questions.
Chicago.
Yeah, and I was wondering how, the whole pothole situation, whether or not that was an issue for you during this trip.
Well, not really. I mean, as far as the experience goes, once you get out of Illinois, potholes become less of a problem immediately. Will the car avoid a pothole? Even with the new, if that's what you're asking, as far as full self-driving, no. It won't yet. If it does see speed bumps, it does see speed humps for sure. So it will, in train tracks, it will slow down over train tracks. It sees all of that. So the assumption of potholes not far away. Now there are some scenarios like I'm paying attention, and there are the potholes it did hit, I couldn't avoid type of thing. There was no option, if that makes any sense. That's usually been the case for the most part. It's usually something that's like you're at 80 miles an hour and there's a car in front of you, a couple car lengths, and you're not going to like do some crazy maneuver to avoid the pothole,
I had a rental, and I was coming out of O'Hare, and that 294 was a disaster zone, man. They're spending the money elsewhere. I promise you that.
Well, I suppose the toll money is going towards fixing our roads. I don't know necessarily, but it's an interesting experience for sure in Chicago. If you're not used to bad potholey roads that are torn up, it gets better middle of summer. They start filling them up, but then they get bad right after winter, after the snow plows have torn them all up. So that's quite the experience. But yeah, so basically what was unique was different. So for the Model Y, and we have a performance, it was able to get to Nashville with 2 stops from Chicago. And that was just kind of insane, to be honest with you, because my Model 3 could never do that. So not only is the new performance more efficient, Model Y more efficient than my Model 3, it has more battery. We'll get into the charging, but the charging is actually better in a weird kind of way. It's just confusing because they changed the charging curve from how my car behaves or my Model 3 behaves. But in general, it was literally, I think we did 4, and maybe I did a 5th stop just for security. The 5th stop was at the hotel, the supercharger near the hotel, just in case something weird happened. I couldn't charge that night. You guys know what I'm talking about. You do that security charge, stop at a local fast charger, give it 10, 15 minutes, and just get to your hotel. That way, if something goes wrong, you can still get up in the morning and get out of Dodge. So that was the experience, which is literally, 15 to 25-minute stops, 4 of them negligible, effectively getting to just north of Atlanta, which is where we stopped the first night. And the second day, we did 3 stops from Atlanta all the way to Cocoa Beach, with a 4th stop just because I didn't want to I stopped at the supercharger at Cocoa Beach. I didn't want to get there with like 10%. I want to get there with like 50%, just if we needed the car, we could use the car. It wouldn't be an issue. So I feel like that's kind of standard in a lot of ways. That said, my experience overnight was a bit jarring because the hotel had a fire alarm go off at 3:15 in the morning, my time, which was 4:15 their time. So I had gotten about 4 hours of sleep, and then I'm with the dog, and the dog has got the fire. That doesn't work. So I knew, and this is maybe my biggest appreciation towards full self-driving, is I was like freaking out, like, how am I going to get up and deal with this? What am I going to do? Well, I'm like, the car can just drive itself. It'll be fine. So the car actually had an update overnight. I let it update, the one where it will pull itself out of parking automatically and just drive you. Like, I just have to pay attention to the front of the road. The car will do, based on my previous date, it'll do everything. And I was Correct. And once the sun came up, I felt better because the sun helps a lot with not feeling the fatigue. But it was actually a huge, amazing thing to realize the car can do this. I'll be okay. We can keep driving. I just got to pay attention to what's in front of me. So I don't have to do the additional stress of holding the wheel and everything else. So, but that's the trip down without a small baby, only with a small puppy. So, well, adult dog, but small. So,
I mean, it sounds like it was just plug in the destination and go. How does that work in terms of the charging stop? So you're just following it exactly what it says it's going to drive you to the charger basically, and then you'll follow its map or route, or are you thinking more, are you optimizing for your own kind of
strategically? Sure. So basically, and that's the thing about supercharging at the moment, and maybe again, we're talking about charging networks in general, how they've improved radically. So I've done this trip now, I think 4 times with a Tesla. And at this point, there are so many supercharger options that I literally have to decide what I want. I mean, I could let it just do what it's going to do and follow it. That'd be fine. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I could just go a little bit further and wait 5 more minutes. That's fine. Or I want to just leave now. Like, you have options now where you can like look and decide what you want to do. So, and you have just enough time sometimes to figure that out. But sometimes you get to the car, it's like, oh, if I just wait 5 more minutes, I can drive an extra 30 miles and then I only have to do 1 more stop instead of doing 2 more stops. Or I need to go now. We're going to run hit traffic or something weird's going to happen, and I can leave now and get to that closer stop too. So there's usually one swing either way at this point. I did not need to use any version 2 superchargers this time. That's the first time ever on a trip to and from. And a lot of them, I'm going to say a third of them now were version 4s actually, which is surprising. They've really popped up very, very quickly. And one of the Buc-ee's we stopped at on the way down, the way back, has a whole new version 4 installation going. It looks like another 16 or 20 stalls of version 4 going in with the existing 16 stalls of version 3. So you kind of have choices.
Buc-ee's?
It's I think it's the one that's south of Atlanta. I don't know I could be wrong. I think it's the one that's the south of Atlanta, however. I'm not sure top of my head, but.
So Buc-ee's is a good place to kind of move us into Walter's, background there certainly, but also, the juxtaposition with some of these, because Mercedes-Benz is pretty much the one that you're going to find most commonly next to a Tesla supercharger. Obviously, as the Buc-ee's and the amenities are the same, so maybe there it's more about pricing or just whatever your car's how it's gonna charge. But as we get into the kind of things that are behind Walter there, which I believe is the Garner, South Carolina Iono Rechargery. Walter, what are you thinking as far as, yes, you can have the car, even in a Tesla, do the entire trip plan.
And Walter, let me add for you, there are Mercedes-Benz chargers at that Buc-ee's, and they filled in from the current superchargers over to the Mercedes-Benz chargers with more. So there are Mercedes-Benz chargers already there at the Buc-ee's. So yeah.
Yeah, I was trying.
So
I think
does that start to bring us into planning? Do we start to think, well, maybe we want to look at the route again because, yeah, the car will tell me where to go, but what if there's an awesome charging station that I want to explore and, just relax in?
Yeah, the one you're referring to, I think, is something Warner Robins, I think is the name of that town where that Buc-ee's is. And I happened to be at one, and there's nothing like pulling into a Buc-ee's. And this is literally what happened. I was at a supercharger with my Equinox. 3 full coach buses pulled in, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll go to the restroom. And those 3 buses unloaded with teenagers, 3 full buses, right? And that store swallowed 3 bus loads of kids like they weren't even there. It was like nothing. I still walked into the place and walked right to the restroom, and it was clean and empty and everything. It was amazing.
Sure. They all went in. Did they all come out? Is the question.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. My YouTube roll has been filled with Buc-ee's recently, and someone had a Buc-ee's effect where they went in and they spent probably right around $1,000 because there were so many things that were perfectly suited for what they were doing on their trip. Anyway, point being is
I shop on my EV trips, and I don't think I ever spent $1,000.
Yeah, they easily they win big. They got apparently you could buy frozen meat that's pre-seasoned at Buc-ee's. That's a new one. I didn't know that they sold that. Yeah, so as far as the multiple options at a single stop, I believe is what you were asking, Steve. Yeah, for me, really, the only limiting factor is the cable length of the Tesla superchargers. The price is good and everything, but that cable length is really a bit of an issue. And I have had some side looks on occasion from people when, especially in my GM vehicle where I'm taking 2 stalls. It's not so much of an issue at Buc-ee's where they overbuild. And I've never seen a Buc-ee's Tesla station that has been at capacity. In fact, most of the time when I roll into them, there's only like 3 people at 20 stalls, something like that. Just kind of a nature of where those things situate and the EV penetration rate. It seems as though those are typically overbuilt stations. But out there in the rest of the country, sometimes that is a bit of an issue. So I don't know. For me, what I generally target is a opportunistic selection, like what Darren was saying, and a little frustration I have when I'm cruising down the road and using ADAS. If I want to adjust my destination, is I get thrown in SuperCruise jail if I look away too long, trying to look at the planning on the screen. You know, the Google navigation, the Android Automotive navigation, in order to select another station. I'm going here, and all of a sudden my car starts vibrating and saying, "Hey, welcome to grabbing the steering wheel for the next 2 hours. You've just been put in SuperCruise jail." So I basically have to plan it out ahead of time. And the way I typically do it is a manual method. But for me, that's part of the fun, planning a trip. And apparently my father was the same way. I asked my mom or explained to my mom what I do. And she's like, "Oh, your dad used to do the same thing." So apparently it's genetic.
Eric, you're a bit more seat of your pants kind of EV traveler, I recall. Is that changing as you hit the road more, or are you still just so overburdened with charging options that you can stop where and when you want to?
Yeah, no, that hasn't changed. And in fact, I mean, I feel like a couple of thoughts. One, I was just going to say to Walter, I am the driver now. I am the SuperCruise now. No, but I think Darren's description, right, of having so many different superchargers, like, and I assume within the Tesla route planner, it's primarily routing you to superchargers and nothing else.
Only, but it will precondition if you target a non-supercharger. That does work. Just I should mention that, but otherwise it's only superchargers. Yeah,
and so and I feel like it's getting to because I would say that was always one of my criticisms of the Tesla network is they would build these huge honking stations, but it would be 100 or 150 miles between them. Even in California, that was often the case. But they've started to fill that in. And so now it sounds very much like the Tesla experience is kind of similar to what I do in the sense that I don't use a specific route planner. I generally know ahead of time the route because one of the things that I got used to doing is checking the status of the stations, because just because they're on PlugShare or just because they're in the navigation doesn't necessarily mean that they are working, that they're open yet, whatever. There could be any number of factors there. So I do at least have an understanding of the route before I drive it, or at least try to. But otherwise, I just drive. And I know that this is one of those things where I feel like out of spec at one point in time when they reviewed, I think it was the Dodge Daytona, and they were talking about how the route planner, they didn't like it because all it does is it brings up chargers along the route that you're driving. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's exactly how I plan my trip. So I think there's a different kind of a mindset there of, do I want a trip curated for me, or do I just want to be presented with the options? And for me, I would rather just be presented with the options, and then I'll decide where I'm going to stop, how long I'm going to stop there, why I'm going to stop there. So I think getting back to skinning cats, Walter, I think there's just multiple ways to do it. But what my mind is now going to is, we've seen Google Maps for a while start to do things. Do you want the more efficient route? Do you want the faster route? Do you want this? Do you want that? It's usually catered to non-EV drivers, but I'm foreseeing a future now where when you do your route planning, it's based around preferences rather than, a specific goal in mind. So are you interested in eating along your route? Are there points of interest along your route? That sort of thing. And that's kind of how I travel anyway. Having the computer kind of plan that for me is maybe okay, but I've found that I just really don't need it at this point. And we had a couple of comments too that they're talking about, like the flawless sort of trips with like the GM Energy, like the Pilot Flying J stations, things like that. I know those would come up in the comments a little bit. And I feel like with the GM EVs in particular, it kind of makes route planning less important because you're not gaming the system. The difference between with like, I guess now not Ultium, but still kind of Ultium. Do we know if we're calling it that anymore? It doesn't really matter if you stop at 5% battery or 35% battery. You're roughly going to be like, the charging times are actually not that different, just because of the way it flattens and then tapers with thermals. So you have this broad, like, and then of course 300 plus miles range in almost all of these vehicles. You have this broad spectrum when you're traveling of, I can stop within this 100-mile gap and it's going to be the same either way. So what's my preferred stop within this 100-mile, hour-and-a-half driving gap that I have? And you can basically plan in the car, I guess to Walter's point, as long as you keep your eyes on the road, you can plan in the car, and then it really just doesn't matter. I think we're finally getting to that point where the trips, and this has always been my goal and my preference, we're finally getting to the point where EV trips are more about the driver and the occupants than they are about the car. Like, we shouldn't be building our trips around the car. The car is there for us to take a trip, not for the car to take a trip, if that makes sense. So
I should add that Tesla's adding those features in the spring update for fastest trip, best amenities trip, or fewer stop trip, and they still let you pick your arrival state of charge. So they are feeling all that need of like trying to like be more customized to the person for sure on Tesla's end. I do think that also the secret sauce for full self-driving is sunglasses. You can then move your eyes, you can't move your head. So that does help on those changes mid-highway. If you have you kind of wear sunglasses anyway if it's bright outside, but you can move your eyes, you can't move your head. That's the secret to that. So just saying.
And Darren, just to stick to the agenda that we had right now, we were supposed to be also talking the FSD performance, and it's been very highly praised with the 13 train. Pretty marked difference between 12 and 13 from what I understand as an outsider. And just as someone who's recently took a trip, a couple of questions if I could just rifle off and you could let me know your experience. You mentioned potholes, and I also concerned about road. For me, road debris is something I'm hypersensitive about, like a floating grocery bag. I'm not sure how FSD would react to that. But like a deer on the side of the road, if I see a deer on the side of the road, I am ultra cautious because I don't know if that puppy's going to start darting into the lanes or not. And so for me, a human intelligence is a little bit superior in that environment, but that's kind of a bit of a closet case. And then retreads, I think, are the number one thing that I'm fearful of is big hunk of rubber coming off a truck and sitting in a lane that I could spot like a couple cars in front that I don't think a camera system would be able to detect, but I would still freaking slam on the brakes, get over to the shoulder and slow down to 20 miles an hour if I saw something like that. So things like that, inclement weather, snow covering cameras, these are all things that I just think as a technologist would be inhibiting. But everything I'm hearing from people who are actually using FSD, the thing is wickedly scary in the advancements that is done in version 13. So as someone who's recently taken a trip, what is your experience with all those different types of scenarios?
Sure. So as far as road debris and things go, my experience, I don't usually let it, is how do I rephrase this correctly? I've not let it go that far. Does that make any sense? If I am picking up on anything that I don't like in the environment, that's just way like spidey sensing me, that's just bad, I'm going to respond immediately. But that's probably a good thing in general, because that's just part of the time. I'm not in the position where I'm going to chance something. If I have a complete understanding of the environment where I want to let it go to the extreme, I'll let it go to the extreme. But if it's too much unpredictability to where I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to take control. And that's not a mark on the full self-driving. It's just, I don't understand the environment around me. There's too much I can't follow at the moment. I'm going to hit the brakes and get away just in general from what's going on. Now, the car could choose to do that. In the past, it probably would have. It would have just freaked out in some scenarios, right? But in my situation, what I experience is that it responds very accurately to a scenario. It doesn't respond like a human in regards to like small, small concerns. So what you might perceive as being a big concern, it's already kind of seeing 5 steps ahead, and it's not seeing it as a concern.
And what about the other way, like a grocery bag, that I don't see it as concern, but
it'll ignore a grocery bag.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, it'll ignore a grocery bag with a new one. It'll ignore anything that's not obviously dangerous to it, is what it seems like. If it thinks it's dangerous, it's going to do something. If it thinks it's irrelevant, it's going to ignore it. I didn't really encounter much road debris, to be fair. I know that it will stop if there's something in its way in a heartbeat. It doesn't like cones, things like that. It's still very true. It understands cones very well, however, at this point. So,
was there any adverse weather on the trip, or
yes, rain. So the one thing, I'm surprised I didn't understand this in the past, but I come from a filmmaking background. So the only thing I do, but I do it for a hobby. And what's interesting is, and even at night, this was true at night too, like pitch black mountainous roads going 80 miles an hour around very high speed, high elevation, going through the mountains in like Kentucky and Tennessee. But as far as inclement weather and all that goes, the cameras are seeing better than I can see. So I was checking that issue, and I was looking at the side view cameras, and I was looking at my view and what I could see. The car was seeing better than I could see, because the cameras don't pick up the rain and what they're visually seeing, right? You might say that's a bad thing to some degree, but in reality, if it's not obstructing their ability to resolve the image like it is for us as humans, then they can see almost through the rain, for lack of a better word. And that's what I was seeing in the side cameras and the rear view camera, is that where I couldn't see very well in the side, like in the rear view mirrors and the side view mirrors, the cameras could see flawlessly. And it was almost daylight. It was brighter than it was outside, and it was clearer than it was to me outside. The same thing was true at night. I'd look behind and look back. I couldn't even see the lights of a car, or couldn't even tell that there was a street. I couldn't even see the road behind me. The rear view camera on the car could see the road, could see the lines, could see everything. I couldn't see it at all. So,
and truly, you went through some construction zones where K-rails were taking away shoulders and kind of squeezing you into the lane adjacent to you, and it reacted well in there?
Yes, except for one scenario, and that one scenario was because they chose to end the lane in like 100 feet where everyone's going 80 miles an hour. I took control.
That's somewhere in the South, I know.
Atlanta. Yeah. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, what is going on? Like, I don't know what it would do. I did let it do another one, and it was okay with it. I'm like, this is getting stupid. Like, this is just dangerous. Like, why is it 100 feet? Like, there's no like warning it's merging. There's no signage. It's just a lane is going to end in 100 feet because of construction. When everyone's going 80 miles an hour. I took control of it. Those are the exceptions. But to highlight it in some better examples, the other end of the spectrum. So when we did get to our location in Florida, we did, and we were staying on Cocoa Beach. I was able to, so this is the positive end, summon the car to come to the front of the building to pick my wife, myself, and my daughter up, get in the car, not touch the steering wheel, tell it to go to Universal Studios, valet parking, It drove uninterrupted all the way from Cocoa Beach, all the way through all the interchanges, all the way to valet. I just had to press the brake to get it to stop. When it pulled up, I got out of the car. The valet took the car. Right. I came back to pick up the car. The car was brought back to me. I didn't touch the steering wheel. I said, go back to where we came from. It drove all the way back. And all I had to do was drive it in the parking lot over to the parking spot and tell it to park itself.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty impressive. Yeah.
That is the other end of the very clear. So there are the fringe things across a 3,000 mile trip that might be like, oh, that was not that great. But that was one thing across 3,000 miles where, you know, and then there's also scenarios where on the highway, it was doing motions to get around traffic that was moving slowly that I couldn't keep up with, that I couldn't tell what it was seeing and where it was going. It was doing things faster than I could track. And it was able to do a left-hand turn in darkness with a train of cars and pull out with only like 3 or 4 cars in between a left-hand turn unprotected and slot itself in. I could never do it because it was over a hill. I couldn't see anything. It was able to do it. I just paid attention and let it do its thing. There are some things that are clearly superhuman. So soon, I think we'll see that be the case across the board. So
I think that's where it starts to get to, you know, one of the questions we'll hit later is essential versus you know, just nice feature, right? If I'm looking at the other end of the spectrum, which I think Ioniq 5 probably is in terms of driver assist, you know, it's too ponderous for me. My wife loves it, but I can't, you know, anything more than the adaptive cruise control and keeping distance with the vehicle in front. I just don't like it. It gets too slow, too ponderous. You want to do an automatic lane change, fine, it'll do it, but it'll take, you know, 10 seconds longer than I would. It'll pull out too slowly. It just doesn't work in Massachusetts traffic, highway, or city. What I was most impressed with, and I think the comments kind of point to that as well, like the previous versions, its FSD has just been, it has had some of that problem, or it's had disengagements where it's been less convenient for you. But now you're talking about, you know, I mean, to be honest, doing a couple of 100 miles for me would be enough. But if you're talking about literally potentially doing your entire journey with a couple of edge case scenarios, that's where it could start to tick into essential, you know, feature, something you would at least want for long trips, as you talk about the kind of stuff that you describe. You know, having a dog is one piece, but having a family, having folks who you want to take care of, having other things to think about as you drive, taking some of the, you know, the stuff that you described, like being superhuman, being able to understand where things are, especially at night when you're tired and you're starting to really get those miles, you know, draining you. That's where I think it could start to really become an essential piece.
And it makes you feel, sometimes now I feel uncomfortable not turning it on because I'm always worried that I'll make a mistake where I know it can't make a mistake. Like, especially in parking lots, small, like just driving with a lot of people around. I know it can't make a mistake in those scenarios, right? Like it will just stop or it will do whatever. It's where if I'm in control and I curb a rim, or if I go over this, or if I don't see a car that's coming from this direction, that's feel like it's on me, where the car could have stopped that or wouldn't have never have happened. So anyway, it's just kind of my take, where I feel like it's safer to have the car do most of it and let you just pay attention to what's in front of you. And then you're kind of the best of both worlds at that point. So
that sets the stage for other systems. I mean, I would count mine as kind of the real lower end of what we're talking about today, but Eric and Walter have both had some experience with SuperCruise. I mean, the Bolt obviously doesn't have, you know, that in the version that Eric has, but you've had the different vehicles from you know, Chevy and GM. Eric, what are you, from what you know about GM and the SuperCruise system, where do you see it stacking up against the kind of experience Darren describes there?
Well, I mean, I think clearly I think that the area where Tesla has the biggest strength with FSD is just in coverage, right? Where they allow it to operate. And that's, I think, what the SuperCruise that I tested was the very basic version, and it was limited in the number of miles, but also, of course, restricted only to divided highways, right? But that being said, when it was operating, I wouldn't say it was necessarily flawless, but it was very capable. I I never felt ill at ease when it was in operation. And I was going to say too, and this is something that, joking aside about the Wile E. Coyote painting a tunnel on a wall, with that though, the report that's come out sort of criticizing FSD, and I think this is where it's important to kind of understand the versions, is the disabling or the disconnecting of it. And because one of the things that came out of that National Transportation Safety Advisory, what is it, not the NTSB, but the NHTSA. So they basically found that like 16 of the events where FSD was driving the car and then it ended up hitting like an emergency vehicle, it disengaged, but it disengaged with less than a second to allow the driver to take over. And so that would be my concern too, is with SuperCruise, when it disengaged, you knew it was disengaging. It was like it's a light show. Everything blinks red, and it tells you it's not going to be working for you anymore. Where that would be a concern for me with FSD. I'm not a huge driver assist. Like for me, it's always been all or nothing, right? Like I like the idea of having an emergency braking system, a basically an auto lane keep if you're going to go out of your lane. So if you start to fall asleep or something, it will warn you and it will grab the wheel and keep you from going off the road or whatever. So it's there just as a backup. Or on the other side of that is if it's working, I want it to basically be able to do everything and I don't want to think about it, right? Like I should be able to sit in the back seat and take a nap. Is the level of autonomy that I would expect. So it's either it's a backup to me while I'm driving, or it's fully capable of taking over everything and I don't need to concern myself with it. And so, yeah, the concern I would have is with that disengagement. And I am having some PTSD. I think that's pothole traumatic disorder. There's a pothole on one of the roads here that I actually hit recently and bottomed out. And then after a rainstorm, I saw it going the other direction, and now it's about 18 inches deep and about 3 feet across. So again, the hole, is it going to avoid the hole? We take bad boys and make them dig holes in the sun all day until they become good boys. So, I don't know. Could FSD do that? I don't know. So that would be my concern. Like I said, SuperCruise, I find super capable, and that everything is predictable because you know when it works, when it doesn't work, when it's going to engage, when it's going to disengage. And so as a difference with FSD, my concern would be with the versions. Do you know whether it's going to warn you before it disconnects? How much time is it going to give you? What kind of a warning is it going to give you if it does? And then, of course, some of those other little issues about the things that can't be seen with the camera, but basically can only be seen with radar. So
I had no disengagements that were emergency like that. So what you're referring to, they have they go flashing, take control now. The car loses its mind if it wants you to take control. I haven't had any of those experience wise in a while. For both the older version 12 that I have in the Model 3 and then the newer version's never had it happen. The current version in the Model 3 doesn't do it. That's an older scenario. Avoiding the pothole, it depends a little bit on the pothole. Like it will definitely not drive through leaves. None of the cars will. So there's a pile of leaves. We have lots of leaves in Chicago around the streets. It will actively avoid the leaf pile. It will go around it. If it was a giant hole, I'm assuming it would do the same thing. It definitely stays away from things that are seemingly bad. But a random rough road, it's not currently there to like say, hey, this is a rough road, I need to zigzag all over the place. That might not even be the safest thing to do anyway, depending. So it's hard to judge that. And I think that'll be an interesting thing. We're talking about like fringe scenarios of the car protecting itself. like Isaac Asimov level things at that point, I think. So, but
Yeah, well,
someone asked, it handles road rage, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's
it
a
never
wider
gets
problem.
mad. It never hits you. Whatever the Terminator 2 thing. Yeah.
Well, that's where you should have profiles, right? You should be able to set it to, genteel, medium,
You have
psycho, and then mass hole. Probably.
well, yeah, because that was actually another one I think made me start to think about this is trailers merging. Did you encounter that at all? Like, I know with like semis merging, I'll generally slow down so that the trailer has room to enter, right? Or the other thing is signaling, and I know this isn't universal among what they call four-wheelers, but if a semi is passing you, you flash your brights so that they know that they're clear to merge back into the lane again. I wouldn't expect that from FSD, but in terms of like you're in the right lane and there's an on-ramp and there's a trailer coming on, a tractor trailer coming on, does it automatically slow down to give that vehicle enough room to merge, or is it going to just keep going, doing its thing and force that vehicle to slow down and then try to merge later? So.
It did encounter that. Under one scenario, it definitely deaccelerated and backed off because the trailer wasn't going to respond. In the second one, it was becoming more aggressive and passed the trailer. It probably depends a lot on the scenario. There was a third one that I didn't really like that much, but that was because the trailer was being basically just erratic and the car just didn't like that at all, obviously. It really responds negatively to like, this is weird. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to like do my own thing. It doesn't like weird behavior on the road. So it will pretty much back off those scenarios. It will not get aggressive in that. If it can plot out a plan to get around it, it will. But if things are too chaotic, it will back off from that almost always. So at least from my 3,000 mile trip, roughly. So.
I want to start edging towards the road trips that folks have shared and what we're planning this summer. But first, I want to give Walter a little bit of space there, both for SuperCruise and any kind of final thoughts on other maybe ADAS systems you've used, or anything you want to kind of put a bow on that topic.
Certainly, the most principal reason I use either adaptive cruise control or SuperCruise in a car, whether it be electric or ICE, over my history, and more recently, more so because I got popped 486 and a 55, which was reckless. I had to lawyer up, and right now I'm under a prayer for judgment continued. Yeah, right. So I cannot get a ticket. So speed control is basically what I use it for. I cannot get pulled over. So I just don't trust myself if I don't have it either adaptive or SuperCruise engaged to not accidentally speed up just because I'm flowing with traffic and all of a sudden I'm going, 12 over or something like that, because that's what the flow of the traffic is. So I keep it engaged like that, and I go 2 over, and I'm fine with people, coming up on behind me. One nice thing about SuperCruise is since I'm not driving, I'm not really emotionally invested in what's going on around me. I'm like, well, it's the car is driving, man. You got to get angry at the car. I'm just sitting behind the steering wheel here. The reason I got that 86 and a 55 is the damn Volvo XC40 Recharge twin is so wickedly fast. There was a cluster of slow moving cars, and I dropped the hammer to go around them, and before I knew it, I was in front of them. But apparently the reason they were going slow is because there was a police officer embedded in them, and he, in that 3-second burst of speed, lit me up and pulled me over, and there's my ticket. So anyway, point being is when I first got my Model 3, the first thing I did is I put it on chill mode, just because that whole dropping the hammer thing inside an electric car can get you in trouble pretty quick. So speed control for me is the principal reason that I use either an adaptive cruise control or an ADAS system. Now, I've never used a hardware for FSD, and I am kind of intrigued about the experience, but I recently took about a 1,500 mile trip through South Carolina and then up into Virginia, stopping at Pilot Flying J's, doing some spotting just to see what was up. And through that time, I basically used SuperCruise the whole time. There's also, as Eric was mentioning, it's very in your face when it thinks it needs you to disengage. And one additional thing it does is the haptic seat vibration, which is a very integral part of the whole integration of how it keeps the person aware of what's going on. There's the side mirror indicators There's the screen itself and the haptic indicators and the steering wheel lighting. There's a bar that goes across the top of the steering wheel that I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And all those things I find to be well engineered. I wouldn't call it bleeding edge technology, but it's definitely above my expectations. And it is also able to pull into a parking space. The auto park assist is what it's called in General Motors cars. And from what I understand, it's such a rarely used feature, they're thinking of discontinuing it, because that's one of the things about GM technology. When they look at their tech stack, they say, who's actually using this shit? And pardon my French. And if people aren't using it, they just stop. So it's kind of like a novelty, like a swimming pool in your backyard. You swim in it a couple times when you move into the house, and then you just clean it for the rest of your life. So the auto park assist I don't use. I don't see much use for it. I'll just pull into the parking space. I suppose it has some value in certain circumstances. I just haven't gotten used to using it, and so I don't. So those are my thoughts on SuperCruise. Basically, my primary use case is speed control.
I should add to that for Walter. You might like the fact that the FSD is so aware of the surrounding drivers that it modulates and controls its behavior based upon the flow of traffic very well. So if you set it to 85 and the surrounding traffic is going 80 or 78, and then it won't go faster until there's a clear person that's going faster. And it will be like, aha, and it almost knows like that sucker is going to get the ticket. I'm going to follow behind that person and go faster now. It's very good at that. That's why it'll
be great when you can give Tesla the ticket. When you go to what is it, level 4 or level 5?
I mean, I literally you set it to 85 and let it do its thing. I never had a concern because it never was so much quicker than traffic around me. So it was never a discerning factor. So,
but can it identify police cars?
Oh, that's coming.
And slam on the brakes.
Gradually slow down.
You let the other cars notice, and then it will slow down because it sees other cars slowing down, which is what it does. It does now. It understands that at least, but not the police car. Hey, that looks like a police car. That'll be really funny at some point, though.
If it can recognize the car that flew by you about 5 minutes earlier, and now it's going suddenly just above the speed limit, that's a surefire indicator that there's a police car not too far away.
But they're working on memory right now, so soon it'll have past and future memory, and it will know a little context of where it's at, which will be crazy. So
there's definite overlaps with AI here that we don't want to go down the path of just yet. Okay, so let's get to some fun road trips that people have either done or are planning. First, near and close to my heart is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That was one of our last trips in the 2020 Chevrolet Bolt EV. It doesn't sound like too much has changed in terms of charging up there. Even some of the Nevi sites may still be on hold, unfortunately, but you can get Tesla superchargers, what did we say, in Escanaba, and I think one of the central towns. So it's a fun place to go and have a pasty, do some boat trips up on the lakes. Kelvis just came back from a road trip in Baltimore to Jacksonville, Florida, kind of similar regions. Last week, only used Pilot Flying J, GM Energy sites, no issues at all. Definite upgrade from the same trip last year.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in really quick, they're getting ready to finish. I just noticed Interstate 20, which connects Atlanta, and it goes all the way to basically El Paso, Texas. And I just realized that Pilot Flying J is very close to finishing Interstate 20, which will slice the south right down the middle.
They've got the cross-country route, which is waiting on New Mexico and Arizona, I guess.
Arizona's pretty full now. They're actually getting to the point where they're doubling up on stations on 40 in Arizona. Is New Mexico, which is the holdout, but they've had one go green in Arizona, so I'm thinking the rest of the dominoes are going to start to fall here pretty quick.
Was that the Ash Fork one?
No, Ash Fork is in Arizona. The one that opened is Jamestown, New Mexico, I believe it is.
I should give a shout actually whilst we're on connecting routes to Electric Era, Eric, because I think they just were talking about some of their latest openings have made it kind of West Coast. You can drive from possibly even up in British Columbia down to the border.
Yeah, they have a few gaps, but yeah, they're Washington, Oregon, and Northern California are getting pretty well covered by Electric Era.
To British Columbia. De Monroe semi-annual road trip, Southwest British Columbia to Southeast Arizona. Trips coincided with Tesla's 1 month free FSD on their 2022 LFP Model 3. It was useful, helped reduce fatigue when it worked okay. So it sounds like there may have been more incident than Darren's trip there, but definitely something that has started to factor into the trips and makes it a little bit easier. I certainly can see that. Jay Donaldson, we have Toledo, Ohio to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Taken the trip many times in the Bolt EV, will take the Equinox for the first time. Gone from 3 EA locations we hit in 2020 to over a dozen options along the route. Right, so it's kind of a nice little snapshot there of both improving infrastructure, but also improving EVs to an extent, right? I mean, I think.
Yeah, and that reminds me, there is one unique thing about SuperCruise, which is far superior to FSD, and there's just no combating this. It's the price. You get 8 years of free SuperCruise, and FSD isn't. And given those two choices, having like a moderately okay ADAS that's not alien tech for free, or get the alien tech thing for the price tag. And I don't know how much it currently is. I think it's $8,000, something like that, for the life of the car.
It's
like
$8,000 or $99 a month.
Yeah.
Well, but there is one other factor too, Walter, and that's that SuperCruise works while towing. And my understanding is it's the only system that does.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I do not believe full self-driving will work when towing is used some sort of magic mystery trick. So
we have a few more road trips up. Scott Owens over Christmas went from Atlanta, Georgia to Key West, Florida and back. Used Pallet Flying J, Circle K, Electrify America. Bottom of the battery, most of the stops, multiple short charges, zero effort. So again, kind of starting to paint this picture of many more options, places you can stop. Certainly, obviously, the Tesla supercharger network comes in, but people are mentioning these Pilot Flying J's, the Mercedes-Benz electric era on the West Coast, a lot of other options, as we start to get to...
The Flying J's are expanding. Like, they were options for me to stop at, to be clear. Like, they are definitely doing a good job, and they are in good locations. So I want to give credit to them for doing what they're doing, because they may eventually be a good choice, even for a person who tries a Tesla to stop at, because they are in such a good location, frankly. And that's even true across the trip.
As well, like for you, Darren, with that, the Bolter's background there, those are going to have high power, potentially canopies most of the time, and also the native NACS connector. Not so much on Pilot Flying J yet. We haven't seen that. I assume they'll go there, but that's not in any of the 150 plus locations yet. Would that factor into your decision if you're...
Well, I'm a big fan of Buc-ee's. So any environment that's like Buc-ee's, well, that Iona location would factor in for sure.
These are NACS stalls right over here.
That's going to be the thing, right? But as you pull into if you see on the map, you'd have to know this, and the system will know it as well, most likely. But if it's saying, hey, this not only does this place have 24/7 amenities, convenient location, canopies, shelter, whatever, and it's got your native plug, no messing around with an adapter at 1 a.m., whatever time you're pulling in, that could be a game changer.
Yeah, we all want that, I think. So I think the more locations that are like that, we're going to flock to them by default. We intentionally go out of our ways to go to Buc-ee's, for example. We know that they are good experiences for us. The same thing would be true for any of these other locations. So, I think that's true for anyone across the board, no matter what plug type you use. If you can charge there and the environment's good, you're going to pick it over one that's in a desolate strip mall that's got nothing there, right?
Yeah, I love Buc-ee's pet-friendly amenities and all the convenience store options. One thing they don't have is a place to sit down. I don't know if you've never noticed. There's no tables, no chairs, no benches, no nothing.
Well, hopefully you came with a car.
You got to go back to your car. They want you to go on out, leave the property.
They're welcoming to a point, Walter.
Well, this actually, as much as I want to stop...
Once they got your money, you're off.
This whole total chaos thing does not sound relaxing to me. I understand, wonderful food.
Don't go on a holiday weekend. Go on a Tuesday.
There are places I would deliberately avoid because they're busy. If it's got that little Google histogram that shows 3 times busier than it was yesterday, probably not going to stop there. Let's see what else. There was BC Hydro I wanted to give a shout out to because they have pretty much spanned the province. For obviously it's a high adoption province. It's got that West Coast thing in Canada, as you have with California and Washington, Oregon areas. But they, for all of it, it's a kind of solid network. I think it's built a lot on ABB chargers, 180 kilowatts, kind of similar, Circle K setup, that kind of thing. But they have rock solid coverage from all the way, up in the remote areas in the north down to the more metro areas in the south. Really good job there. And to me, it's the West Coast version in North America of what New York has done with Evolve New York. Local EV drivers who know where they need to go, are responsive, know the value of these charging stations in the middle of nowhere, top of the province, top of the state, whatever it is. So I think it's worth shouting those out for sure. And Doug mentions he's been Stuart Cassier Highway to Yukon, back by Alaska Highway.
I understand that was untraversable before, but BC Hydro seems to be filling in all those gaps in there.
It would make a lot of sense. I mean, they're the only ones, the utilities are going to do it, and they need that local knowledge to really anyone can figure it out if you look at a map, but it's the ones who actually know who drives where, what kind of conditions you've got, and how many charges you need in that location to really start to fill in those gaps. Bashawn mentions a few road trips here. Planned Buffalo to Cleveland. That's a familiar one to me. Buffalo to Atlanta, less so. Buffalo to DC. I-95 corridor stuff there, getting a little bit crowded as you get into the 95 zone, but there's some good coverage, as we said, across New York State now, thanks to Evolve and a few of those Pilot Flying J kind of locations.
And Steve, I should also mention the return trip traveling, and we've talked about charging speed obsession and time stopped. And I think the biggest thing that I should bring up is that when you're at an EV stop and if you have a family, the charging time is largely irrelevant, because most likely under most conditions, you guys are going to experience somewhere between a minimum at best 20 minutes turn time and most likely above 30 minutes. We had some scenarios where we stopped and we were charging, and the best we could turn was like 32 minutes. It's with taking the baby to change her, feed her, the dog going to the bathroom, us going to the bathroom. Could be almost 35 minutes of stop time, and you start factoring all that in, especially depending upon the location and depending on how helpful the dog is or not in the scenario. But the reality is that most people are focusing on this like 10-minute, 15-minute turn. But most EVs, I think all the ones that we have, at least for sure, after 35 minutes, you're pretty moving on, most likely, or you can move on, right? In some cases, we're almost full. Eric, in your case, you're getting, no matter where you're probably closer to 65%, 50% at minimum. It's still a good 100 miles plus, so maybe more. So
Eric's in the store getting cat litter.
Oh
Yeah.
Or in the diner enjoying dinner.
But
Yeah, I mean,
if
if I'm on a 350 kilowatt, I might be all the way up to 70%.
there you go.
Yeah, your movie isn't over yet, so you're not going outside.
Well, but to Darren's point too, and I think this is the balance for EVs. Is I think you're right. Like a 30 to 40 minute stop, especially when you have pets or when you have family members or just other occupants, right, in the vehicle. That 30 minutes goes by way faster than I think a lot of people realize. So at that point, it's more about, in that 30 minutes, did you get enough range added to be able to drive until it's you that's wanting to stop, right? Not the car needing to stop. And I think most of the EVs now have finally gotten to that point, that 300 mile plus class of EV.
So I thought I'd got through all the road trips and was doing a good job, but then I realized I was in the starred section and a whole new slew of them came up afterwards. So I'll try and crank out a few of these so we don't overlook anybody, especially the average EV. Congratulations, Tyler, on getting past 7,000 subscribers, I think, this week. So excellent work, and testament to all the good Equinox EV content, which I've used recently to direct people to buy that vehicle. But he's heading to Disneyland from Maryland this summer, and a short road trip to North Carolina Friday will be fun too. Awesome stuff. Chase looking from the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, down to Omaha area at some point in the next couple of months. Not sure what would take you down there, but you can share with us, or you can just keep it a mystery and we'll get you back on the show to talk about it. Ill Traveler kind of, again, that's come up probably 3 or 4 times from a few different people, how Pilot Flying J has filled in these locations. This is Beaver Dam, one of the Navy sites in Ohio, between Toledo and Dayton. They've done a really good job of filling those gaps with the money they've got federally. Let's see, what else have I missed? Anthony kindly reminds us to give a little thumbs up if you're at a loose end and have a second to boost the algorithm. Thanks for that. And Scott, just another plug for Pilot Flying J, his preferred stop of today's options, but high hopes for the one in the background of Walter there, with A.N.Other having nationwide plans. And Ron, thanks for joining us, even late. Appreciate you jumping in. 2020 Taycan, 101,000 miles in the California Central Coast. So I do want to figure out how many miles we have between us. I think from what I have covered, I know the Ioniq 5 is close to 90,000 now. I did about 70,000 in the 2 Bolt leases. So I'm somewhere in the upper 100,000s. Walter, where are you at in terms of overall EV mileage? And you're muted, so if you're sharing secrets.
I couldn't even guess. I know in my current car I've got 2,800 miles. Car before that was over 60 in a little bit over 2 years. The Lyriq has got 50. The Tesla Model 3 long range, I can't remember what we turned it in at. I think it was 80-ish. So that would be a little south of 200, something like that. Yeah. Plus, throwing a bunch of rentals in there where I crisscrossed I-10 up to Florida, and
this is it. Yeah, I've done a bunch in rentals thanks to the Ioniq 5 being in the shop. But Eric, you've got all on one vehicle at least for a lot of them, right?
Well, I was going to say, are we talking just BEV or are we counting all plug-in?
No, I think you can count. I've got probably a couple of thousand on a Volt as well.
No. I mean, I'm saying like plug-in hybrids. Are we counting that or no?
Yeah, it's got a plug.
All right, then probably 500,000 actually. My first Volt I traded in at I think 170,000 miles. The second Volt I think currently has a little over 80,000. I'd have to double check. And then of course my Bolt EV has almost 190,000 now. And then not counting the other test, like I figured if you're saying just battery electric, so forget the Volts and other plugins, I'm a little over 200,000.
Darren, you must be. Date back to the Bolt days, right? So
yeah. Well, that's yeah. So my Bolt I got in November of 2018, and it was bought back at some point by Chevy. I put about 38,000 miles on the car in about two and a half years. The Model 3 I got with about 21,000. Now it's at about 48. So, and then my wife, who just got her car, the Model Y, we've gotten now like about 3,200. So we're probably around, I've only got 65,000 miles of EV experience, which is kind of hilarious based upon your guys's mileage. I feel.
Well, I was thinking because those trips. I mean, the Florida trip is a big one, right?
I mean, I took Denver and back too, so we did that even in 2020. So I mean, I have some trip experience. The Bolt's gone. The Bolt went to Denver and back. The Bolt went to Columbus from Chicago, went back Columbus, Ohio, and then went to Louisville and back, and then into Kentucky. And then the Model 3 has gone 3 times or 4 times to and from Florida, and now the Model Y has done 1. So a lot of trip. Oh, and also the Model 3 has done a trip up to Madison, Wisconsin. I got to count that. I should count that, but that's not that far. But we've done that. But mostly it's around town. And in Chicago, you might drive 10 miles in a day at most.
In 2.5 hours.
Yeah, and 2.5 hours if you're unlucky. So I mean, my former work commute before we went fully remote I was driving the Bolt about 60 miles a day minimum. So if that had continued, I'm sure I'd have crazy mileage too, right? But it didn't continue. Now I'm working remote and I get to get back my 2.5 hours of driving time a day. So
I know, Darren, you agreed to go late, but you have done, and we appreciate you staying with us for 90 minutes, a solid football match there from European parlance. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate your road trips there. We'll kind of have a lot more, I think, coming up. Everybody's out on the road and starting to do these trips. I think the ADAS piece was interesting. I think that's a different kind of experience from what I've been used to on those long trips, and certainly, the Hyundai system isn't anywhere near what Darren's describing. So I'm interested to see if our in-laws still have the FSD free trial, which seems to be never ending at the moment, and maybe try out some of those longer routes. But appreciate all of your time and stories this evening. You can check Darren out over on Darren Orange 2982 on YouTube. You can find Eric Way at Newscoolum 3705 and Walter at the Network Architect channel, and his regular appearances now on Out of Spec Bits, which is shorter. Actually, Walter's videos are always succinct and well to the point, but some good insights coming from both there and the Network Architect channel right now. Anything you guys want to call out before we jump off the stream here?
I'll be going here on Friday, and likely meeting Tyler from the Average EV up there.
Sweet. So you've got that content coming through. Eric, what are you looking at? I've seen some shorts from Williams, California.
Yeah, I'm just kind of keeping tabs right now. I haven't actually done a lot of driving. I have some solar deliveries on the way, so I decided to try to beat some of those tariffs. So I'm having to stay close to home while I wait for some things to arrive. So
okay. There's a whole other spin-off podcast, possibly energy related. Darren, anything trip-wise coming up in your future? Anything we should watch out for?
we have nothing really planned. We got to do some trips though. We have solar and stuff, so the cars are charging quite a lot with the solar, so they're going to be full, and we're going to need to do something with that power. So hopefully we'll do something cool this summer. Go someplace neat. So
sweet, good stuff. From our perspective, you can look at plugandplayev.com/coast-2-coast-EVs. That is an accurate schedule as far as my slightly addled mind has been putting it together, but I think it's correct. And the next one is April 30th in 2 weeks' time with Andrew Cornelia, CEO of the Mercedes-Benz High Power Charging Network. So all of these kind of preferential stops and premium Buc-ee's experiences, we will be able to go through with him on those, but also the Starbucks partnerships, the Simon Properties, and anything else that we can ask him to expand upon. So join us in a couple of weeks' time for that. Darren, thanks so much for going late with us, and same to you guys. Appreciate you hanging out. Till we move on to the next one. Cheers, nerds.
Like.